Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Pot, Shots, and Slots. My name is Tiffany Scriver and I'm an addiction counselor on the community treatment team. And before we dive into today's topic, I just want to remind you that we are still open and able to support you. Just give us a call at 905-684-1183 and you'll be able to speak to one of our staff who will help you get connected to a counselor. So what are we talking about today? Identifying and labeling emotions. Might be a topic that we kind of run from sometimes or just want to brush off or not have to deal with, but I promise you there's something helpful for you within this today. So just promise to stick it out with me? Okay. Emotions are normal. We all feel them. As a human being, we're going to have emotions. There's no two ways about it. And they come and go like waves in the sea. So if you think about it, our emotions kind of ebb and flow in intensity, right? There might be times where they creep up and they're at a peak and they're really strong, and other times where they kind of peter out. And while emotions can feel overwhelming and feel like they never go away, they do eventually kind of peter out. We don't feel the same emotion at the same intensity all the time. One of the things to also think about with emotions is that, they can be triggered by so many different things. Things that we may not even really be that aware of, like certain thoughts that we have, people we might be around. We've all got those kinds of people that push our buttons or we feel like know how to push our buttons. Certain situations, certain environments might generate some type of emotion. Heck, it could even be hearing something on the radio or the television or as you're outside walking your dog, right? So it could be anything that triggers a certain emotion, but those are just a couple of examples. And the way we express our emotions looks really different too. We can do that verbally with our words and our tone, right? And then there's our nonverbals like our body language and our facial expressions, right? That communicates to other people and it communicates to ourselves too. It can be really hard to manage how we're feeling and deal with it and cope with it if we don't understand how our emotions work, or if we can't identify how we're feeling. Think about it. If I asked you right now to tell me what you were feeling or how you were feeling, what would you say? It might be something like, oh, hey, Tiff, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling great, fine, okay, crappy, right? Or maybe you put a word on it. What's tricky is that most of us are used to responding when we're asked how we're doing with a variation of what I just said. The trouble with that, though, is that it doesn't really tell us or the other person who's asking really what's going on. And the other part of that, it actually reduces the kind of emotional vocabulary that we have that's available to us to help us figure out what the heck we're feeling. So a few things I want you to know about what emotions do for us, because I think, we can be really intimidated with how we feel. So when we know a little bit more about like what their purpose and function is, that can help us be a little bit more on board with tolerating how we're feeling. Okay, first things first, they motivate us to take some kind of action. They motivate us to make changes. So if you think about any change that you've made in your life or a change that you've been contemplating, maybe it's even the change of getting connected with us. I bet you there's an emotion behind it. Something that you're feeling that maybe you can't quite put a word on, but maybe you feel it in your body, or maybe you do have a word for it. It motivates us to take action and motivates us to do something different. Emotions help us communicate to other people. And we can do this verbally or non-verbally, like I mentioned earlier, with our facial expressions or body language. Sometimes what we're saying doesn't really match up with what we're saying verbally because of how we're presenting non-verbally, right? So emotions communicate to other people. And really, most importantly, I think they communicate to ourselves. Our emotions can be signals for us to check things out, whether that's if something is dangerous or safe, right? It might make us curious about something. It invites us to search for a little bit more information, right? When you get that gut feeling about something, right, you want to investigate, that's emotion, encouraging us, communicating us to look into things a bit more. So in order to understand how to regulate, right, how we're feeling, we gotta know. Bottom line is we gotta be able to label and identify it. And just the sheer fact of naming it and labeling it helps us regulate them. No joke. In the research, there is information that talks about that just by putting a name and a label on an emotion, you reduce its intensity. Okay, that sounds like pretty easy. Sign me up, right? So that's the first part of it. What you'll see at the bottom of this video is a PDF with this beautiful emotional vocabulary wheel that has lots of different emotional words on it. I encourage you to check it out to help you get a feel for emotions that you might be feeling. Because sometimes, bottom line is, some of us are just better at figuring out how we're feeling than other people. For some of us, it feels like we're caught in a fog. We're not really sure what we're feeling. So sometimes I find looking at a piece of paper with some options helps me tap into it a little bit more. The other tricky thing is when you're engaging in an addictive behavior, so substance use, gambling, or gaming, right? Sometimes we use those things to help avoid or suppress emotions. And that's the surest way for us to keep having emotions, is by not labeling them or identifying them or really dealing with them. And if we want to keep having them pretty intensely, continue to avoid them and suppress them does that. So if you want to improve your ability to cope with how you're feeling and you don't want to feel emotions so strongly or get overwhelmed by them, then I encourage you to try and tap in a little bit more to some language for them. Okay. When we do those things, right, you avoid and suppress, it disconnects you from what you're feeling. So we don't really know. And like I said, it increases the intensity. Okay. So ultimately, the goal, like what is the point of being able to identify and label how you're feeling, is simply this. By doing that, you're going to increase your ability to control and influence your emotions. We're going to be able to be less reactive and more responsive. We're going to be able to better respond to them when we have them, and our expression of them might even become more effective. So Tiff, how do I get some practice with this? Okay, stick it out with me. Here we go. Take your emotional temperature, right? We want to put our finger on the pulse of it. And first, I just want you to do that by taking a few deep breaths. In and out through your nose until you can feel your body kind of calming down. And then with curiosity, asking yourself, while looking at that emotional wheel in front of you, what feeling am I aware of? Right? Look for the words on the wheel to see what fits. You might then ask yourself, when did I become aware of this feeling? What time of day was it? Where was I? Was I with someone? Was I just watching or reading or listening to something? And lastly, where am I noticing this feeling in my body? Is it in my chest? Is it in my stomach? Do I feel a bit of a headache coming on? Our emotions show up in our body. So those questions there can help you put a little bit more of a pulse on how you're feeling and bring you one step closer to being able to identify and label how you're feeling. Not only does that exercise bring you closer to that, it's going to increase your self-awareness, which increases your attunement to how you're feeling. And not only is it going to help you feel more connected to other people, but it's also going to help you feel more connected to yourself. Wishing you health and happiness during this time, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you soon.